My sister stole my millionaire fiancé 10 years ago, then mocked my single life, until I shocked her. Welcome back with a new real shock story. Before we start, comment and tell me which city you're watching from. At the end, don't forget to subscribe and rate it from 0 to 10. Let's enjoy the story, everyone.
I never thought I'd tell anyone this story. But here I am, because it still haunts me every single day. You need to understand, it wasn't just about losing a man. It was about losing trust, losing my sense of worth, losing my life in a way I didn't even realize until much later. I want to take you back to the moment when everything started to shift. When my whole world turned upside down. It was a rainy afternoon, the kind that makes the air smell heavy with promises and secrets. I was sitting in my favorite cafe, sipping coffee that had gone cold without me noticing. My phone buzzed. It was my sister, Maya. She never called without a reason, and I knew it. The last time she'd reached out, it was to brag. I ignored it. But this time, there was something in her tone that made me pick up right away. She said nothing about the rain or my day, just, "Alec, you should see him now." My heart stopped. Him. My fiancé. James. My James. The man I had dreamed about marrying since I was 17. The man I had trusted with every piece of my heart. He was my whole world, and Maya knew it. That phone call felt like a warning I didn't understand yet. Before that moment, life felt simple. I was 25, working in a small marketing firm, living in a cozy apartment I had painted myself. James was everything to me. Supportive, loving, endlessly patient. We had plans, marriage, a home, children someday. I thought we were building something forever. But I didn't know that forever was quietly cracking under my feet. I didn't know that betrayal was already brewing. The next day, James told me he wanted to meet Maya. He said he had something important to discuss. I was nervous, but I brushed it off. He spoke so seriously about her. I thought maybe it was about her own struggles. But when I walked into the coffee shop that afternoon, my heart sank before I even saw them. They were laughing, not casually, but in that way where they leaned too close, eyes sparkling in a way I had never seen James look at me. That's when something inside me shifted. Something told me this wasn't just a conversation. It was a beginning of something darker. Over the following weeks, I began noticing things. James texting Maya late at night, disappearing without telling me, coming home smelling of perfume that wasn't mine. My instinct screamed that something was wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on it. Every time I confronted him, he reassured me with that easy smile that I knew so well. But it felt rehearsed. I started sleeping less, waking up with this pit in my stomach I couldn't shake. Maya seemed to be everywhere, in my dreams, in my fears. One evening, James invited me to dinner. It was supposed to be romantic. Candlelight, quiet music, my favorite dish. But he was distracted, checking his phone too often, smiling at it in a way that felt wrong. I asked him, and he told me it was nothing. I wanted to believe him. I really did. But deep down, I knew. Something was breaking between us. Something I could not fix with flowers or sweet words. I should have listened to that instinct sooner. A month later, I learned the truth in the most brutal way possible. I was scrolling through Instagram when my phone froze on a picture of James and Maya together. Not a friendly picture, a wedding-like picture. His arm around her waist, her head tilted into his shoulder, smiles that belonged to lovers. I felt like someone had punched me in the chest. I couldn't breathe. My hand was trembling so much, I almost dropped my phone. I stared at that image for minutes, hours maybe, until the cafe faded around me. Everything I thought I had was gone. I never confronted them that night. I couldn't. I left the cafe, walked alone in the pouring rain, and cried like I hadn't cried since I was a child. Eve, my step felt heavy, each breath sharp. I wanted answers, but I also knew they wouldn't bring me peace. That night I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering, how could she, my sister, my own blood, the woman who I trusted more than anyone? From that moment, my world became a whirlwind of confusion and pain. I wanted revenge, but I also wanted to disappear. I wanted him to hurt as much as I did, but I was scared that I'd lose myself if I let it consume me. I started pulling away from everyone, family, friends, even myself. I became quiet, hiding my pain behind smiles that no one saw through. But inside, I was counting the days, waiting for the moment I could face them. That moment came 10 years later, and what happened next changed everything. I won't tell you how it ends just yet. That's not my story to spoil. But I will tell you this. It's a story about betrayal, about heartbreak, about the quiet ways revenge grows inside a broken heart. And I promise you, it will not be what you expect. So tell me, if someone you loved, someone you trusted with your whole heart, took everything from you and mocked your pain, what would you do? Would you forgive? Or would you make them pay in the most unexpected way possible? This is my story. This is what happened to me. I couldn't sleep that night. My mind kept replaying that picture over and over. James and Maya, smiling like nothing was wrong, like they had stolen something that belonged to me and didn't even care. I kept asking myself how they could do this. My sister, the one person who should have been my safe place, the one I trusted without question. And James, the man I loved with everything in me. For weeks, I barely spoke to anyone. I went through my days like a ghost, walking, working, eating without tasting. I told myself I was too heartbroken to face the world. But inside, I was planning. I didn't yet know what for. I just knew I couldn't let this go unanswered. Months passed. James stopped hiding his affair. It was no longer secret whispers in the dark. It was open, public. He began to distance himself from me completely, speaking to me with a cold politeness that made my skin crawl. Maya seemed to glow around him, a smile that burned in my mind every time I saw it. Every encounter between them was another knife twisting in my heart. I began watching them, not in a creepy way, but in a way driven by desperate need for proof, for closure, for something tangible to explain why this happened. I followed them, through mutual friends, social media posts, even one time to a restaurant where I saw them laughing like nothing had ever happened. My stomach twisted every time. That laughter felt like it belonged to a world I was no longer part of. It became unbearable. I began avoiding everyone who reminded me of them. My friends tried to console me, but my anger was too raw for comfort. I couldn't talk about it without breaking. I stopped answering calls. I stopped going out. The world seemed to shrink to just one question. What was I supposed to do now? Then one night, I got a message. It was from Maya. Short, just 3 words. We need to talk. My hands shook as I read it. I had blocked her number, avoided her, pretended she didn't exist. And yet, here she was, stepping into my life again. I didn't respond right away. I stared at her name on my phone for hours before I finally typed something. Why? The reply came almost instantly. Because it's time. That message became the spark that started everything. For weeks after, I wrestled with whether to meet her. Part of me wanted to yell, to scream at her for destroying my life. Another part was curious. Why now? Why after 10 years? What could she possibly want to say that would matter? Finally, I agreed to meet her in a quiet park, somewhere neither of us had ever been before. The night of the meeting, my heart was pounding so hard, I thought it might burst. I walked slowly toward the bench where she waited. Rain, starting to drizzle around us, and when our eyes met, the silence was heavier than words. She didn't look apologetic. She looked different, confident, even proud. "You look the same," she said softly, "but I know you're not." I wanted to ask her what she meant, but instead, I just stared at her. The air between us felt like electricity, dangerous, charged, ready to explode. I knew this conversation was going to change everything. Not just between us, but everything I had left of myself. She told me about James, about how it wasn't just about love. It was about power, about how she had felt invisible all her life, and how she saw something in him she could use. I wanted to scream, to tell her she was lying, but her voice was steady, filled with a kind of cruel satisfaction that made my stomach turn. Then she said something that made my blood run cold. "I never wanted to hurt you, but I wanted to win." That moment was the tipping point. I realized I wasn't just broken, I was being baited. And I knew that if I stayed silent, if I let them walk away unchallenged, this wound would never heal. I had to decide, do I walk away or do I fight? For 10 years, I'd lived with this pain quietly. But that night, under the cold drizzle of that park, I decided it was time for something else. It was time for her to see what happens when someone you wrong push back harder than ever before. And so I began. The weeks after were the start of a careful, quiet war. I didn't know exactly how it would end, but I knew I had to take control. I began gathering everything: photos, messages, dates, witnesses, piecing together a story no one could deny. I wanted to hit them where it hurt the most, not just to take revenge, but to reclaim the part of me that I had lost. Every day, I planned. Every night, I dreamed about the moment I'd confront them. I imagined their faces when they realized they had underestimated me. I imagined the satisfaction of telling my story in a way that could never be erased. And then, finally, the day came. I didn't just walk into their world. I stepped in with the purpose. I was no longer the hurt sister. I was someone who had found a reason to rise again. The confrontation I had been waiting for was about to begin. But what happened next was something I could never have predicted. The morning was heavy with quiet, almost as if the world knew something was about to break. I woke earlier than usual, my mind buzzing, my heart pounding. Every step I took toward their world felt like walking into fire. I dressed simply, nothing flashy, nothing that would draw attention, because I didn't want them to suspect what was coming. This wasn't about drama, it was about truth. When I arrived, James and Maya were already there, sitting at their usual cafe table, laughing like they owned the world. That sight twisted something inside me: pain, rage, disbelief. I stood at the edge of the cafe, breathing in deeply, feeling my hands tremble. Then I walked over. My voice was steady, but my body felt electric with tension. "Can we talk?" I said. They looked up, surprised. James frowned. Maya smiled in that smug way that made my blood boil. But she didn't speak. She just nodded, and I sat down. For a moment, silence stretched between us. The noise of the cafe faded into nothing. It felt like the entire room was holding its breath. I opened my bag, pulling out my phone, a notebook, photographs, pieces of my pain turned into proof. "I've been quiet for years," I said softly, "but I'm done. I want you to hear everything. I want you to feel the truth you've tried to bury." Maya tilted her head, her expression unreadable. James's jaw tightened. I laid the photos and messages in front of them. Dates, words, proof of everything they had done. My voice cracked, not because I was weak, but because the weight of the years of betrayal was finally finding its way out. "You took him from me," I said, looking at Maya. "And you didn't just take him. You mocking, ked me, humiliated me, made my life into a joke. For 10 years, I've been living with that wound. But now it's time for you to understand the cost of what you did." James opened his mouth, but I stopped him with a look. "Don't. Just listen." They listened. I could see it, the shift in their expressions. James's face fell. Maya's confident smirk began to fade. There was silence again, but this time it was heavy with guilt, with truth. I leaned forward, voice quiet but cutting. "Do you know what it feels like to love someone so deeply, only to have them taken from you by the person you trusted most? Do you know what it feels like to wake up every day with the echo of betrayal in your chest? That's my life now, and you're the reason." For a moment, Maya looked away, her eyes glossy. James just stared at me, his hands tightening around his coffee cup. I stood. "I don't need your apology. I need closure, and I'm taking that with me. Not because I want revenge, because I want to live again." The cafe felt different as I walked away, lighter somehow, even though my chest was still heavy. I realized then that this confrontation wasn't just about them. It was about me reclaiming myself. But even as I left, I knew this wasn't the end. The world had heard part of my story today, but there was more. This wound wasn't just mine. It was something that countless others carried silently, and I couldn't let it fade away. That day, I decided to turn my pain into purpose. I began writing, speaking, sharing my story to anyone who would listen. I wanted people to feel what I had felt. I wanted them to see the quiet destruction betrayal can cause. I realized the truth, that sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't to destroy the person who hurt you, but to rebuild yourself so strong they can't touch you again. But rebuilding isn't easy. It takes years. It takes fighting through nights filled with doubt. It takes facing your own fears and letting them go. I learned that the hard way. Months later, I sat at my desk, looking at the photographs I had once brought to that cafe. I still felt the sting, but it was quieter now. Not gone, but softer. I understood something then, that pain will never disappear completely, but neither will strength if you choose to fight for it. I didn't need them to admit they were wrong. I didn't need them to feel guilt. I needed me to remember that I survived, that I took my story back. And as I looked out of my window that night, I asked myself a question I still can't stop thinking about. How many times do we let people steal our peace before we stand up and take it back? Because I know this now, peace isn't given, it's claimed. And I was claiming mine. Walking away from that cafe felt like stepping out of one life and into another. My heart was pounding. But there was a strange sense of relief mixed with the ache that still clung to me. I didn't look back. I couldn't. Not because I was scared, but because I knew my story was still unfolding. For days after, I couldn't sleep. My mind replayed every word, every expression, every moment in that cafe, as though it was etched into me forever. Every night, I would lie awake wondering if they even understood what I had just done. Did James feel guilt? Did Maya feel regret? Or was it just another victory for them, wrapped in silence? But my mind kept returning to one truth. I wasn't doing this for them. I was doing it for me. I realized that for 10 years, I had buried myself under a mask of normalcy, pretending I was okay, pretending I had moved on. But the truth was, I had been broken. The confrontation had been my way of breaking free. I started spending more time writing. Every morning, I poured my thoughts into my journal, shaping them into a story. Not just my story, but a story I knew others might live through too. I wrote about betrayal, heartbreak, resilience, and reclaiming power. I wanted my pain to matter. I wanted my voice to matter. One evening, I walked past the same cafe. It looked different somehow, quieter. The laughter that had once seemed endless now felt hollow in my mind. I didn't stop. I just walked past, my steps lighter, though my heart still carried the weight of what had happened. Weeks later, I began sharing pieces of my story online. At first, it was just friends and strangers commenting, but then it grew. Messages came in from people who had experienced similar pain, who said they felt seen, who said my words gave them courage. That's when I realized something powerful. My pain had transformed into something bigger than myself. But the healing wasn't complete. Every day, I still wrestled with the anger and sadness. Every day, I reminded myself that forgiveness wasn't about them. It was about finding peace within me. Some days were harder than others. Some nights, the tears came without warning. But each tear was a step toward letting go. One rainy afternoon, I found myself standing in front of my mirror, looking into my own eyes. I didn't see the broken Alec Rose I once was. I saw someone stronger, someone who had survived betrayal and was learning to thrive again. I whispered to myself, "This is your life. Take it back." Months passed. Life moved forward. I found joy in small things: morning coffee, a walk under the rain, a smile without guilt. I began meeting people who saw me not as the girl who had been hurt, but as the woman who had risen. That recognition healed me in ways confrontation never could. And then one day, I received a message. It was from Maya. Short, simple. "I'm sorry." My first instinct was to ignore it, but something inside me told me to read it. I did. And the strange thing was, I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel triumph. I felt peace. Not because she admitted anything, but because I no longer needed her to. That night, I sat by my window, watching the city lights flicker. I thought about the journey, the pain, the confrontation, the healing. I thought about how betrayal had stolen pieces of me and how I had taken them back, piece by piece. I realized then that life doesn't give closure in neat packages. Closure comes in fragments, in quiet moments, in self-acceptance, in reclaiming your voice. And mine had been reclaimed. But my story didn't end there. It became a mission, a reminder that too many of us live in silence, carrying wounds we think no one will understand. I began speaking at gatherings, sharing my journey, encouraging others to stand up, speak out, and claim their own peace. And every time I spoke, I asked the same question. How many of us keep walking away in silence when we should stand and speak. How many lives are lived under the shadow of betrayal without ever finding the light of truth? For me, the answer was clear. One voice can change 1,000 silences, and I would be that voice. Because pain, when spoken, can turn into power, and I had found mine. As I closed my journal that night, I knew this was only the beginning, not just for me, but for everyone who had ever been silenced. My pain was no longer a prison. It was a doorway, and I was stepping through it. The months that followed felt like walking through a fog and suddenly finding the sunlight. I was no longer defined by what happened, but by what I chose to become after it. Every morning I woke up feeling a little lighter, a little stronger. The betrayal that once consumed me was no longer my master. I was. I started spending more time helping others who had gone through similar pain. I listened to their stories in coffee shops, online chats, and small gatherings. Each story reminded me that betrayal wasn't just a private wound. It was a shared human experience. And healing wasn't just personal. It was collective. The first time I spoke in front of an audience about what happened with James and Maya, I was terrified. My voice shook at first, but as I spoke, I felt something shift inside me. People leaned in. Eyes glistened. Some nodded quietly. I realized that my pain had become something that mattered, something that connected us. I told them the truth. That silence is easier, but it isn't healing. That forgiveness isn't forgetting, but freeing yourself. That standing up isn't always about winning, but about reclaiming your peace. I told them that the real courage is living again after you've been broken. Life kept moving forward. I met new people, made new friends, and even fell in love again. But this time it was different. I didn't depend on love to define me. I had learned to define myself. My happiness wasn't tied to someone else's approval. It came from my own choices, my own strength. Sometimes, I still think about that moment in the cafe, the shock of confrontation, the mix of fear and determination. That moment changed everything. It was the moment I stopped hiding, stopped shrinking, and began to own my truth. And then I think about Maya. I wonder if she ever understood what she had taken from me, and what she could never take away. The lessons, the growth, the courage. I think about James too, and how he chose his path. But I don't dwell on them anymore. Their story isn't mine. Mine is about me. Standing here now, I see my reflection in the glass, stronger, wiser, unafraid. I see a woman who learned that betrayal can break you, but it can also make you. That pain can either bury you or build you, and that the greatest revenge is living your life fully, freely, without fear. If this story teaches one thing, it's that no matter how deep the wound, there is a way forward. It may not be quick, and it may not be easy, but it is possible. And it begins when you decide to stop letting the pain define you. I end my story tonight with a question. What would happen if every person who had been hurt found the courage to stand and speak? How much lighter would the world be if silence turned into truth and truth into healing? I don't have the answer. But I know this. My silence is gone. My voice is mine again. And I will never let anyone take it away. This isn't just my story. It's the story of anyone who has been betrayed, silenced, and overlooked. And maybe, just maybe, it's the start of something bigger. Because when we speak, we change the world. And I've decided to speak.